I really like this movie. Merry Christmas, everybody. I am the Spear Man, the embracer of human good and analyst of fiction. And I felt the perfect Christmas movie for Christmas Day is none other than the Jimmy Stewart classic, It's a Wonderful Life, with Donna Reed, and of course is directed by the legendary Frank Capra, with his famous or infamous Capra corn. However you'd like to perceive that. Just so you know off the bat, this is not... as much as I really like this film, this is not a classic per se, at least in my eyes. That's just me, and a major reason why is because of the Capricorn, because, I mean, the last act of this movie is still really damn good after all these decades, but the first two acts, the majority of the film, like an hour, 15 minutes, almost an hour and a half, it's just so corny, it's just so cheesy, like, even for a 40s film, I don't think the amount of cheesiness is tolerable. And I don't know much about Frank Capra history or Capricorn or etc. And of course, Jimmy Stewart would become very famous for being in a bunch of Hitchcock pictures later on. But yeah, I mean, I still really, really like this movie despite the flaws I personally find with it. But yeah, what better way to spend Christmas Day than to watch one of the earliest alternate universe-esque stories ever made, decades ago at this point, one that truly emphasizes the holiday spirit and all that good stuff. Okay, let's not waste any more time. Let's get started with what I remembered reenactment of It's a Wonderful Life. Starting now. Okay, so to begin with, we see very awesome atmospheric shots of a town, showing some different houses, I believe, where we hear some people praying, like random characters praying, including, I believe, the wife character Mary and her children, George's children, who are praying about someone named George Bailey. And the one that always sticks out to me, the person praying who always sticks out to me is one of the girls. I think it's Zuzu, if I recall correctly, who's praying, "Please, God, there's something really wrong with Daddy. Please help Daddy. You've got to help Daddy." And after we hear all these prayers and the camera backs out with these atmospheric shots, we see like two or three of these starlight sort of beings that are glowing every time they talk. They're like up in the starry night sky, and I guess they're supposed to be the head angels or something, because I don't specifically remember one of them being implied to be God himself. And they're talking about, so what exactly is going on in that town? Well, it seems like there's a fellow named George Bailey that really needs help, and I think I know just the person to take care of this. Clarence? But Clarence doesn't have his wings yet. Are you sure he's ready for such a task like this? Oh, I think it's about time we put him to the test. And then they call for Clarence, and you see the smaller starry entity come up going, "I came as fast as I could. What do you need me for?" Well, Clarence, it seems like there's a man named George Bailey who really needs help right now. And I just remembered this. In fact, he's considering taking his own life, which is the worst crime anybody could commit. Oh dear, well, what can we do to help? Well, in order for you to understand this man, I need you to see exactly what has happened that has led up to this. And so starts the grand majority of the film. that tells the extensive backstory of George Bailey. We see like the audience that barely sees anything other than fog and mists, and we hear Clarence saying, "What's going on here? I can't see anything." Just hold on, hold on. You're about to find out. And then we see some flashes of George Bailey's childhood. This is George Bailey when he was only 9 years old or when he was only 12 years old. Can't exactly remember. I can't remember if it's the very first thing we see or one of the first things we see, where we see George, his little brother Harry, and friends playing at an ice lake. And at this ice lake, when Harry Bailey rides down his sleigh, he cracks through the ice on the ice lake itself and almost drowns, but George saves him. And even though George saves him, he's also permanently deaf in his left ear because of the experience, because of risking his own life and such. You need to pay attention to this, Clarence. This is very important. Okay. And then we see other aspects of George's childhood where he had a part-time job at a drugstore, I think, or maybe it was just a candy store. And he makes a little wish on a machine saying, "I wish I had $1 million." He doesn't get lucky and goes, "Hot dog." And he has childhood friends Mary and Viola. And Viola's flirting with George. "Hi, George," being the cute little girl she is. And there's this funny little moment that stands out in the film where Mary and Viola are talking. And Viola says, "I like George." "You like every boy. What's wrong with that?" Implying that little Viola may or may not become a prostitute or a gold digger or whatever she is as an adult. I more or less remember her. I remember more of her in the alternate universe. So yeah. It's also around this time that we see young George talking with his boss and telling him that something's wrong with some ingredients or some items he's mixed up, that he's accidentally made some poison, or he's accidentally mixed some rat poison. I think that was rat poison he was accidentally mixing up. And the boss gets mad at him at first, like thinking he's just trying to show off or trying to patronize his elders or whatever. But George says, No, sir, you don't understand. You could have poisoned someone. I was just helping you. You could have poisoned someone. And when the boss finally realizes what this all means, he drops down and hugs George, saying, "Oh, George, I'm so sorry. Thank you so much, George. Thank you. It's okay. And this is also, even though the head angel and Clarence don't mark it as such, this is a very important event for later on. I think at this point we skip ahead to when George is an adult. We see a young adult George Bailey, like 18 or 21, making some hand gestures, and the movie just suddenly stops, and we hear Clarence say, "Wait, why did you stop? What's going on?" Because that is George Bailey as a young adult now. "Oh, really?" "Yes." Now pay closer to attention to what happens during the rest of the story. And so we see George talking to some business dude, and I think he has this graduation party, and he's talking with Mary about, "I'm going to get out of this crummy little town. I'm going to go see the world. You see the moon up there, Mary? I'm going to wrap a lasso around it and bring the moon down to you." And they also have this fun little song regarding marriage, about maybe they could get married someday, maybe not. I don't remember exactly how the song goes, but it goes to a little something like, "Blah, blah, 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 fellas, won't you come out tonight? Won't you come out tonight? Won't you come out tonight?" And blah, 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 by the moon, hot dog. So yeah, we have the cute stuff with Mary and George, where their romance is developing, and they have graduation party and such. And I think at this point, George also had a part-time job at the bank. And I forgot to mention this, but there's the evil old Mr. Potter in a wheelchair. Even though he's crippled and such, he's a big, bad businessman who's ruthless and doesn't care about anybody. And I think he was really bad to George's father when George's father was still around and so forth. Everybody hates him. He's a mongrel. He's a tyrant. He's a local corrupt money tyrant or whatever, banking tyrant. And there's some big business position that he's been trying to go for that I think George's father left behind, or some other nice guy left behind not too long ago. And George, just as he's about to leave town, leave his hometown life behind for good, telling the bankers, no, I'm done. I'm done with this crummy town. I'm finally going to get out of here and live my dreams and so forth. But just as he's about to leave the door, the banker friends of his are making him realize, literally at the last second, but George, if you don't stay, they'll vote for Potter. And George realizes that he has to stay right at that moment, or else Potter is going to, mess up everything. Is going to make everything his own glorious, self-glorious utopia or whatever, dystopia. There's a scene not long after this where George is one of the key people at the bank now, and he calls out on Potter for being the awful man he is, telling him, Potter, you're nothing but a crooked old spider. You deserve to be crushed or whatever. And then we see George getting married to Mary and having some kids, including Zuzu. Took me a while to remember that girl's name before this video, just before I made this video, but I remember her name. I don't remember the other kids' names. Gosh, I think I'm already close to the final act, and we're barely 10 or so minutes into this video. But whatever. The final act is where the good stuff comes. I think George's Uncle Billy is supposed to gather $8,000 of money for something or other, but he accidentally loses and misplaces it. And to make it even worse, the lost and misplaced money ends up in the hands of Mr. Potter, who realizes exactly whose money is this. And he can see Uncle Billy frantically looking for it because Billy is realizing just what a horrible mistake he's made. And Potter, he knows this is going to ruin George, and he's not going to give it away, and neither is his weasel assistant or whatever. And soon enough, George himself realizes what a horrible thing has happened with Uncle Billy, and I think he shakes up Uncle Billy, demanding, come on, you have to remember. Tell me where the money is. I don't remember. I don't know where the money is. And apparently, if George doesn't get this money, if George doesn't recover this money fast enough, he's going to be sent to prison. He'll suffer years in prison. And I think at this point he goes home to his family, and he gradually loses himself. He gradually gets sadder and more depressed, and he's crying and embracing his kids. But eventually he just lashes out and he kicks over furniture, destroys furniture, because everything he's worked so hard for is all crumbling down acceleratingly. And after he angrily refuses the house, coldly leaving his family behind, he's desperate enough to go to Potter for help, telling him he needs the money, he needs something from him, but Potter just mocks him, going, no, this is exactly what I wanted, this is exactly the chance I wanted, now you're ruined, nobody's going to want you in this town ever again, now go on, George, go on before I call the police, that's right, run, George, run. And George freaks out, he gets more and more freaked out and runs out. And then he goes to the bridge, he's ready to end it all, he's ready to jump off the bridge and end it all. Which is a shame, too, because he's become so beloved by the town despite everything. And his brother Harry, I forgot to mention this earlier, his brother Harry has become a war hero in World War II of all things, because this is a 40s film, and the story itself takes place around 46, which was the year this movie was released. And the biggest thing that Harry did that was so great was that he saved a whole frigate, a whole battleship of U.S. soldiers, and saving dozens, maybe even hundreds of lives. But, it's all not going to matter as George is about to throw himself off the bridge to his death. And we see this nice-looking fellow nearby looking at him, watching, and we don't realize it yet, but it's Clarence. And he jumps off the bridge first, and George, realizing he has to save this random guy, goes down to the water safely in order to rescue him. And he and Clarence get taken to this police stop nearby. And after a little talking here and there, Clarence tells George, I'm your guardian angel, George. I'm here to help you. If you're an angel, then why don't you have wings? Well, unfortunately, I won't get my wings yet unless I help you. And George, they talk some more about how horrible things have been recently with the money and all. And George says, I wish I had never been born. Things would have been so much better if I had never been born. Oh, no, no. George, that's a terrible thing to ask for. That's a terrible thing to want. Wait a minute. That actually might be just what you need. And then I think Clarence, I don't think he snaps his fingers. He waves his hand or does a big wave with his hands, and all the snow that was snowing outside suddenly disappears. And Clarence says, there, it's done. You were never born. What? Real funny. Wait, wasn't it snowing just a second ago? And my ear. I can hear out of my ear. My left ear. I haven't heard out of this ear since I was 12. And George goes outside and tries to find his car, which had crashed into a tree earlier when he was angry, I think. But his car's gone, and I think it was around this time. It's this early into the final act, because we're definitely in the final act now. Clarence explains to George, you were never born. You never existed, George. You have no driver's license, no photo ID, no cards, no anything. You're completely free. You have a complete clean slate. And George is searching himself all over to see if he has anything at all, but he just shrugs it off, tells Clarence to screw off, and goes to a local bar. And right away at this local bar, everything is a bit too chaotic, more chaotic than a bar should ever be. And Clarence finds him, and he gets all sad when he hears a bunch of bells ringing, going, oh, well, it's happened again. What? Well, every time a bell rings, an angel gets his wings. And some people laugh at him, and George comes across the shop owner, the drugstore owner that he used to work for as a kid, and the drugstore owner is all miserable, and he's I think he's a drug addict or something at this point, and George goes up to him and says, Mr. Whatever, what happened to you? How are you like this? What the hell's going on? Who the hell are you? Leave me alone, leave me alone. And George asks around, what happened to him? Why is he like this? What are you talking about? That guy's been in prison for 20 years for poisoning some kid. So that thing that George did earlier where he saved that shop owner from accidentally poisoning customers, that's finally come back here in this alternate universe where George never existed, because that guy was in prison for 20 years for poisoning some kid with rat poison. And then George gets into a fight with the people at the bar. He and Clarence get thrown out, and one of the bartenders goes, look, everybody, I'm getting my wings. 100 more angels are getting their wings, because he's dinging the cash register again and again for the hell of it. Clarence tries to remind George again what has happened, that his wish, his very rash wish has been granted. But George just ignores it again, and he tries to go off and explore the town. But the town, I don't remember the name of the hometown anymore, but the hometown has become Pottersville now. And George walks around and looks around, and all the shops, all the restaurants that he knows about are not there anymore. There's just casino here, bar here, casino there, another casino there, bar there. As much as you could put in the local town. Excuse me. And he also spots Viola, who's being thrown out of some bar or some casino. And she's a prostitute and addict at this point. And let's see. Can't remember much else that happens around this point. I think George goes to see his mother, who's still alive, who is always still alive at this point, at a retirement home, but she's living miserably and she doesn't recognize him. And she hasn't had a son in a long time, in regards to Harry, who we'll get to in a minute. And then Clarence and George come across the ruins of an old house. I think it was either it was George's childhood house, or it was the house he was living in, or had always been living in, that he continued to live in with his family, with his wife and kids. But the police show up, and as they chase him out, one of the policemen holds down Clarence, and Clarence is calling out, Sir, save me, please save me. And then Clarence just gets teleported away, and this charming little music is playing, like, and then I think George ends up at the cemetery, even though this is clearly a world, a version of the hometown that is completely controlled by Potter, undoubtedly, how do I put it, ruthlessly controlled by Mr. Potter. You don't see him, you just feel him everywhere. He's been a horrible, horrible person this entire time, and you just feel his presence everywhere you look. Everywhere you look, everything you see is all Potter, 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 and it's really, really bad. But George ultimately ends up at the cemetery. This is one of the last things he does in this alternate universe. He gets mad at Clarence again and telling him for like the 10th time, this is not possible. This is just not possible. None of this makes any freaking sense. And worst of all, he comes across Harry Bailey's grave. The grave of Harry Bailey, who died when he was only 9 years old. No, Harry's not dead. Harry couldn't have died that day at the ice lake. I saved him. No, you didn't, George, because you were never born. Harry was the only child your mother ever had. That's not true. Harry survived that day. He grew up. He became a war hero, and he saved dozens, hundreds of people on that frigate, hundreds of U.S. soldiers on that frigate. No, he didn't. All of those soldiers died that day because Harry didn't save them, because you didn't save Harry. Which makes it like colossal times worse. And George is, even though he doesn't directly say it, you can see it all over his face, all over his body, that he's finally accepting the worst. And then he realizes, Mary, where's Mary? What happened to Mary? And Clarence like shakes a bit, and eventually he tells George, she's a special kind of woman, George. She never married. She was never married. Where is she, Clarence? Oh, George, you're not gonna like it. Where is she? At the library. She's closing up. And so then we cut to George spotting Mary, who's this miserable old 30s-something librarian with glasses and dark clothes and stuff, leaving, and George is all distraught. This is like the worst thing he's seen out of everything, apparently, because this is the woman he loves, who is miserable and all. And he goes all over her saying, Mary, what's happened to us? And Mary just freaks out because she has no freaking idea who this random guy is. And she passes out in some townspeople's arms, and the cops spot George. Hey, there's that guy from earlier, get him! And the chase is on, and George gets chased out of town, back to the bridge where this whole mess started. He stands at the bridge, and this time he looks to the heavens and begs, I don't want this anymore. I don't want this. I want to live again. I want to be born again. I don't want this. Please, please, take it back. Take it all back. Please, please, please. And then the snow suddenly comes down on a crying, sobbing George. And then this cop friend of George's from earlier comes up, spots him, and cries out, George, what are you doing all the way out here? Now back off, Bucky, or else I'll break your arm again. But George, Mary's been looking for you. We've all been looking for you. What? You just called me George. And my ear. This ear is deaf again, and Zuzu's pedals. I have Zuzu's pedals. He realizes right away that everything's been turned back to normal. He runs back to hometown, and he cries out to every bit of town that he knows and loves. Merry Christmas! Merry Christmas! Merry Christmas, you old restaurant no do-gooders! Merry Christmas, you old racket store! Merry Christmas, everybody! And he cries out Merry Christmas to everybody. He even goes up to Potter's office, yelling, Hey, Mr. Potter, I'm going to jail! Woohoo! And Potter, a bit confused, just shrugs off, going, Yeah, and good riddance to you, Bailey. Yeah, who needs Potter? Potter was never a good person anyway. He was the bad Potter decades before there was a good Potter in books and movies. Harry Potter. Potter. Anyway, so eventually after George greets everybody that he loves and misses since his time in the alternate world, the alternate town, he finally comes home. He embraces all his kids, and he embraces Mary, he's more happy than ever to see. He gives her a big hug and kisses her and stuff. And even though he has to prepare for the worst of going to prison, at least everything is back to normal. But then Uncle Billy and I think dozens of townspeople show up to the house, and little by little, more and more, everybody drops George off some money because they love him so much, and they're willing to give a little bit of help to save him. And he recovers the $8,000 from before, like that. The $8,000 is almost instantly recovered through other people's loans. He has even more money than that. He has even more money than to pay off whatever debts he had to pay off before. And his brother Harry comes home saying to my brother George, may he always be the town's friend, and so forth. And people start singing Christmas songs, and George gets this note from Clarence, who disappeared earlier, as you remember, just before George went to find the other Mary. He sees this note from Clarence saying, thanks for the wings, and remember, no man... How does it go? Okay. And remember, no man is truly alone so long as he has friends. And George is happy, and then there's a bell ringing, and Zuzu tells George, look, Daddy, every time a bell rings, an angel gets his wings. Yeah, that's right. Attaboy, Clarence. And then the family gives each other one final embrace together. The end logo plays as the holiday singing is heard overhead, and the movie finally ends. Whew. Wow. So, let me see here. Did I remember that right? Is that how It's a Wonderful Life goes? I mean, don't get me wrong. It's still a really, really good movie. A very, very solid movie. But the first two acts, and I didn't go too much into this with my whole reenactment stuff because honestly, I don't really remember too much of the cheesy stuff. There was plenty of it. There was plenty of cheesy, corny stuff. That alone I remember, and that's enough to go on. And it really, I'm sorry, but the whole Capricorn thing, it really weighs the movie down from being a much stronger, more effective, more believable film, which is ironic to say considering that this is fiction, as are thousands of movies and TV shows and etc. But apart from that, you know, what they build up to in the final act is still really well done. The final act itself is still very, very effective after all these years, after all these decades. In fact, the last time I saw this movie was a few years ago, quite a while ago, back when I was at this film workshop I used to attend to learn some stuff about filmmaking, and this was one of the movies we watched around Christmas time. It was quite a while ago, and it'll be great to finally see it again after all these years, because you can't truly judge a movie by... You can only judge a movie by so much until you actually see it again, or see it for the first time fully. Anyway, not much else to say here. This film has more problems than I think people give it can admit, but there's still so much to like about this film, and I can't wait to watch it again as soon as possible. So, thank you so much for spending a little bit of Christmas time today, or any day in December, during the rest of December, or in the future. And yeah, I really, really mean it. Thank you so much for spending a little Christmas time with me and good old George Bailey, Jimmy Stewart, and the Baileys, and the hometown that I still can't remember the name of for the life of me. And of course that dang old Mr. Potter who just won't accept that people are good at heart and all that stuff. Alright, that's it. If you've never seen It's a Wonderful Life, if you've never seen damn it, there goes Fiend Fellow again. I'm trying to mess up my videos. If you haven't seen It's a Wonderful Life yet, definitely go check it out. But if you haven't seen it in a while, go check it out again. It's probably a lot better than you remember, or not quite as masterful as you remember. Take it for what it's worth. It's been a lot of fun making this video for this truly, truly marvelous film, despite its personal problems for me. And yeah, Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas one and all, and I'll see you around New Year's Eve for one last December video. Not to mention that we finally ended the Christmas 9. How about that, right? Okay. I've babbled on long enough. Thank you so much again. I am the Spirit Man, the embracer of human good and analyst of fiction, saying good night and Merry Christmas to all. And see you again very, very soon for New Year's and especially for 2019 coming up. Good night and Merry Christmas.